Hello, nerds, and welcome. We are Crossing the Nerdverse, bringing you yet another episode. And this week, we will be talking about sports. I'm just kidding. We're continuing our foray into 40K, and we will be
Yeah,
talking about the Tyranids.
USA Canada right now, bud.
It's happening right now. Oh, way to throw in the bud and make it super Canadian. That was fantastic. Are you auditioning for Letterkenny soon?
I mean, if they'll take me, I want to be someone they beat up though on the ice. That's what I want.
It shouldn't be a hard sell.
No, I'm willing to let them even punch me in the face. In case
I'm
you're
willing to
listening,
make it
Letterkenny.
real.
Yeah, I'm bleeding for you.
Anyway, with that, we're going to keep doing our thing where we start off our episode with talking about news. And I know one of the big pieces this week was the team from Marvel Rivals being let go. Not to say that is the whole team for the creation of Marvel Rivals. It was literally just the US based team that did like level design and I think some of the like smaller like patch notes for object interaction, but still sad to see people let go. But given the history from NetEase, I think is who made the game, or is the company that owns it. Yeah, it's pretty typical for their behavior. Once a game gets to the launch stage, a lot of that design team does get let go until the next project starts.
I think also it seems to me that they are kind of divesting teams from U.S. teams in particular because they closed down 3 other teams that they had here before their games were even released. They just cut them out. Yeah. So I don't know.
There was one in Canada too that they hit up.
Oh, really?
They either closed or scaled down teams. So yeah, it looks like they're just trying to control expenses, I guess.
I mean, that's usually the corporate speak, because it's cutting costs. So.
Yeah, I mean, but the upside is those people will get new gigs. It's not like they're going to be on the market for long after releasing a game like this Marvel one. I mean, it's everywhere.
It feels shitty that they have to count on that, right? Like they have to count on being scooped up by somebody else.
Yeah, I mean the game dev industry is kind of just shitty anyway, right? Like,
yeah, I
saw a meme and it was like, do a bad job, get fired. Do a good job, get fired. Create a super successful game. Guess what? Get fired.
Get fired. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is a fact.
Yeah, it's just an interesting time that we live in regards to something like that.
I mean, but like I said, even with NetEase, it's not even them. Like, it's pretty typical for the gaming industry as a whole to just let people go post-launch or even pre-launch in some cases, of games just once their portion of it is done.
Yeah, you keep a minimal team to keep everything updated and flowing, and then on you go.
Yeah, because I mean, the design is the heaviest part, right? Getting everything built and out there and launched. It's the upkeep of it, while intensive for games like Marvel Rivals and the rest of those, MOBA style games, because you always constantly have to update and balance and patch. But yeah, so I mean, bummer that they got released. I'm sure, given the success, they'll get gobbled up by another studio before too long. At least I hope, anyway.
Yeah.
And probably the other thing to talk about is just the big release with Captain America. The movie's doing a lot better than people thought it would, even though there's a lot of people kind of saying it's not the best.
It's sitting at like right at 50% on Rotten Tomatoes as far as the audience score. Haven't had a chance to go see it yet. It's
I haven't
on my to-do list.
Yeah, it was my plan to go watch it on Tuesday, and real life got in the way. That's always fun.
But that always happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's doing good though. Like it's surpassing what they expected. I think they've already made more than the cost of the movie, and it's only the opening weekend, so that's pretty fucking sweet considering how Marvel movies have been doing lately. And regardless of what people want to say, I do think Sam is a great Captain America. There's nothing wrong with him being Captain America. He took it over in the comics too. So like some people that are saying different things, like that is actually what happens in the comics. I don't know, like if people didn't read them or something.
Yeah, let's throw it over to our comics expert.
I mean, that does happen in the comics. As far as the movie goes, though, I haven't watched it yet, but I think that it suffers from a problem that I think also Thunderbolts might suffer from, and then it's normal people fighting gods.
Yeah.
Like, that's never going to be, like, that great of a story, because they're not going to win without, like, a very obvious plot armor, right?
But plot armor is
like
the
they need some kind of
strongest armor.
MacGuffin, or talk him down. Like fucking, the sun's getting real low there, buddy. Like something that's just like out of
No,
nowhere.
they should take the Naruto strategy and turn them into a friend.
I mean,
So-
there are
The
quite
power
a
of
few
friendship.
bad guys that become friends.
Yeah,
mean-
more. Yeah, I mean, that's not uncommon, but
In the comic book world, everybody cycles through being a good guy and bad guy at some point.
Yeah.
Like,
And this plays into our ending question from last week, in that, I don't think there's anything wrong with telling a much smaller scale story. It's the normal people versus gods kind of aspect, but on a scale that's more believable. That's where we get good stuff like Cox playing Daredevil. I think was a fantastic story. I haven't seen the movie yet either. I'm hoping it's doing really, really well. I know this is one that I had to catch myself on, because I was initially a little irritated at the recasting of Thunderbolt Ross. Then I looked up why and went, well, I mean, as far as reasons go, that's a pretty freaking good one.
yeah.
So
share with the rest of the class on why the recast happened.
the original cast guy died.
Yeah.
So
It makes it hard to get.
Makes it hard to
see
get
how
him
that'd
back,
be a problem. Yeah.
um,
Was the Saturday Night Live skit with Will Ferrell where he's playing the host? He's like, next week we'll talk to Albert Einstein, and somebody comes and whispers in his ear. He's like, my producer just told me he's dead, but we're gonna try and get him anyway.
Fuck yeah.
But yeah, so I'm hoping it does well. I want Marvel to continue to make content, make movies, make TV shows, and for them to do that, they got to be successful. So, I am hoping it does well. Breaking even on the opening weekend sounds like a good start. So,
Spider-Man,
I'll
Friendly
take it.
Neighborhood Spider-Man was that's my news that I wanted to think. It's over now. The season finale was yesterday. It was good.
Yeah.
I liked it. I liked the whole season. It was fun. I recommend it. I was
Excellent.
apprehensive because the art's a little bit weird to get used to, but once you kind of watch a few episodes, it's like I don't mind it. And
I was checking
it's
out the
way
art in the
different.
trailers, and it never it is different, but it never really struck me.
The story is way different for Spider-Man, but I think in a very good way. It's nice to have something that's not just Spider-Man and the Sinister Six.
Here's
Those,
Uncle
there
Ben
are,
dying.
yeah.
Again. No,
Yeah.
So
that was always
it's
my
good. I
big
like
gripe. I was like, stop with the Uncle Ben dying. We can skip that part.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that it was good. I'll definitely be putting it on my list. I haven't started watching it yet. I've actually been making my way through Solo Leveling. Currently, I'm almost done with that. Absolutely loving that. So,
Are you on season 1, or have you started seeing the
I
new
just
season?
started season 2.
Oh, it's really good. So much
Yeah.
better than season 1.
I couldn't wait for more of the episodes, so I read it all.
I don't blame you. This is one of those that I finally got around to watching it. I just bit the bullet. I'm not even through Delicious in Dungeon yet. And
God, I love Delicious in Dungeon. It's such
I'm
a good
enjoying
goofy anime.
both a lot.
It's so
But
wonderful.
Solo Leveling, I threw it on because I was updating some stuff on the Xbox and had half an hour to kill, and then immediately could not stop watching it. It's got a vibe very similar to My Vampire System, for those of you that read digital novels and stuff, and I'm absolutely loving it. On the subject of additional news, however, one that affects us and all of our viewers and listeners that listen to the show post our live production, April 19th is going to mark the new storage limitations on Twitch that is going to be affecting our channel. Twitch is making it so any kind of video demand or on-site storage is being limited to 100 hours. And so for those of you that want to watch our content, our backlog of content, your best place is probably going to be to still get it off of places like Spotify, or more akin, go to YouTube. YouTube's letting us host all of our stuff. YouTube's kind of become our new base of operations.
Our
Because
whole
Twitch,
library is also on Amazon Podcast.
yes, Amazon Podcast. So yeah, we're gonna be
I
base
put that shit
camping
everywhere.
at YouTube. Yeah. But
We're like
unfortunately, we
Frank's
are
Red Hot.
going to be limited on Twitch. Only about the last 95 episodes or so are going to be up, so bear that in mind. And that starts April 19th.
All right, and that we're gonna jump in. Who wants to get us started on Tyranids?
I'll get us started because I have to say the same thing I say every time we do a 40K episode.
Everything's canon.
Everything is canon and nothing is canon. Retcons are a way of life, guys. We're going to do our best to parse all of the data that we've been able to acquire, But if there is inconsistencies with things that you've read or things that you've seen on the internet, that's at this point got to be by design for 40K. So I encourage you to come at me in the content or in the comments down below. Let me know this wasn't this way because of this, and I'll go look it up because I'm interested in learning new things. So yeah, fair warning to everybody. We're doing our best with 40K, but 40K is not a friendly lore area. Everything is canon and nothing is canon.
I was like, it's super friendly. It's very forgiving because
but yeah,
all of it
Tyranids,
exists, but none of it exists.
Boy, I tell you what, this is one of our topics that kind of scare the shit out of me.
Are you
there's
kidding? They're
so
like
much
the
to
least
cover.
threatening species in the galaxy.
Yeah,
They're just
that.
a total cakewalk. They're like the Skaven from Warhammer
Yeah,
Fantasy.
just
They're
no
not
real
a big
threat at
deal.
all.
Yeah, it's fine.
I just think it's base. I just think of what you call it, Helldivers 2. Kick some
there
ass.
you go.
No, they're way scarier.
Yeah, Tyranids are
way
the
scarier.
scariest. They are the scariest species in all of Warhammer, in my opinion.
And
Yeah.
like by a lot.
Yeah.
To be fair, they stand the best chance of destroying all the Chaos Gods. And their
By
defense.
eating them?
And everything else.
No.
Now they can't eat Chaos, unfortunately.
Yeah, there was briefly in 9th edition a Splinter Fleet that took on a new name that kind of evolved to specifically fight demons and chaos entities.
Yeah.
They
But not
they
to, like,
developed more
absorb
long range combat specialties so that they could just kill them before they got into melee. I
Alright,
honestly
so
don't know as much about Tyranids, so I'm curious to see where this goes. I know a bit, but I'm sure
so I
one of you
think
also has to know
there
more.
was a Tyranid is something I've dived in a lot. Realistically, I've been chewing on this episode for about a week because there's two places to start. So I'm going to cover them both as best I can and have you guys jump in with things that you know about it. And that's going to be how they were discovered and exactly what they are. Because at a base form, Tyranid are not understood by a vast majority of the fan base. And so I'm just going to start off by the fact that, again, we're in 40K, so there's two sources of Tyranid discovery that we're going to tie to the Imperium of Man. It's from that frame of reference we're going to be working because the Tyranid are vast and ancient and predatory and not even from our galaxy. So discovery is a weird concept. And so as a point of reference, we're going with the Imperium of Man. And that's going to lead us to two names. We have Fidus Cryptman, part of the Inquisition, and Cyphus Cain.
Commissar Cyphus Cain.
Commissar Cyphus Cain.
It's like a Tribe Called Quest. You have to say all of it.
So Cyphus Cain is the one most commonly attributed the
Commodore.
the discovery of the Tyranids, and that was in M41 942. So this is where things get a little bit weird. Now, the reason we call them Tyranids is not because that's what they call themselves or how they refer to themselves. They don't actually do that kind of thing. It's because of the planet of Tyrannus and the ice world of Nosquam. Fundamentibus.
Oh, dude, I'm glad you tried that and not me.
But in any case, so this is where things get a little bit naughty towards The Thing, like a classic horror movie, right? Because Commissar Cyphus Cain, god damn it, Travis, discovered a bunch of Tyranid organisms that were frozen in kind of this cryo-hibernation on the ice world of Nosquam that had been kind of buried in the permafrost.
For like
and so,
several thousand years, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, they had been there a long time.
Again, this is where Discovery gets into kind of a weird zone. Now, with his discovery, that's very much is it Carpenter's? John Carpenter's The Thing kind of homage. And the way that story goes is very much like that movie, like that story. There are accounts that the Tyranid were actually discovered by an Inquisitor who didn't discover the Tyranid specifically, but discovered information on the Tyranid when he actually got access to the Black Library because of his alliance with the Harlequins, who we talked about last week. So that leads us to Tyrannus. and the planet that is recorded for being one of the first ones actually attacked by the Tyranids, and where they get their name. Now, why are these things so difficult to pin down, and why are these things so difficult to talk about? Well, now we're going to switch over to something everybody knows a little bit more about, other than when they were first discovered. Oh, wow, full time out for Travis.
We skipped over what originally drew them to the galaxy in the first place.
Hit me.
This is the beacon in the warp, the Emperor's Light, allegedly.
Allegedly.
They were already
Because they
here,
Yeah.
like before that. So,
Well, and here's my thought about it. They don't actually use much of the warp. In fact, they destabilize it by their simple presence.
the shadow.
Yeah.
The shadow in the warp.
And so
But I
having
mean,
them drawn to a giant moth flame in the warp seems weird to me in the lore. Now, you're right. There are several sites and sources that cite that as why they're here. But it doesn't add up to me. It doesn't feel right.
All I'm saying is what's been published, all right? Like, I'm just throwing that out there.
Again,
It is in a book.
I mean, I agree with Ryan. Like, it doesn't make that much sense, and we know that from other sources that they were already here in various forms and formats.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and then the orcs had thought about them, and so they sprang into existence. And
That's where everything came from. Actually,
Yeah,
the
we're
orcs
all
actually
one
just
big
always
fever-
exist.
yeah, we're one big fever dream from the orcs,
So let's give
who are
a
also
nutshell.
in charge of cataloging the Black Library, apparently,
Yeah.
which explains why everything's canon.
Right. Well, you imagine the Harlequins in the Black Library while the books keep changing because the orcs are learning or forgetting shit. Like, so the Tyranid guys. The Tyranid are kind of 40K's answer to all of those giant predatory space bugs that we see in science fiction all along the mid-century up till 1990, whatever, 2000s, whatever. They're 40K's version of the Starship Trooper bugs. We actually talked about this before the episode. The Starship Trooper bugs, they are inspired heavily by the Xenomorph from the Alien franchise. They're a great analog to the bugs in Helldivers 2. They're effectively 40K's version of that. And frankly, 40K's take on that, I think, puts all the rest of them to shame.
And if you're wanting, like, just a mental visual representation, imagine if somebody took a whole bunch of, like, reptiles, snakes and lizards, and then hybridized them with a series of insecto-like creatures, and then turned them loose is really the vibe I get, because you get kind of a reptilian vibe from them, you get kind of an insectal vibe from them. What's up, Bones?
Well, Eric first. He already had his.
Okay, so and one thing everybody needs to like absolutely know, the Tyranid are much more gruesome, dirty, dark, and difficult to kill than Space Marines 2. Everyone needs to know this because I didn't realize that until I started jumping into the lore and reading Horus Heresy. I know I only did Murder World. I didn't do much with them yet in it, but they're much, much more fucking gruesome, dark, scary, and difficult to kill. The game did them absolutely no fucking favors.
Yeah, it did them dirty.
Yeah, like they are legitimately exponentially more difficult to kill than what the game showed.
Yeah. I just wanted to point out real quick, while we were talking about what they are inspired by, I want to talk about one thing that they explicitly inspired is the Zerg.
Yep, 100%.
From StarCraft, for those of you.
They were straight up like, not a ripoff per se, because like the Zerg are different enough, but they said, hey, this is where we got the idea from.
Yep.
Definitely heavily inspired.
Like, it's acknowledged that that's where they got it from.
I mean,
Well,
people
you
got
gotta
to realize this is an extremely old game. That like I didn't even realize how old it was until I got involved
80s.
in the podcast. Yeah, so like this came out like prior to a lot of like bug movies. Like
we got to be coming up on almost 50 years for too long here.
Yeah, we're rapidly approaching that number.
Yeah, I'm looking it up right now. September of '87 is the first Warhammer 40K.
And Vulcan is still alive and will be back.
Well, yeah, he's a perpetual. Of course, he's still alive.
Yeah, I was like, he's always going to come back.
All right, so that's kind of what we're dealing with, guys. Now, the reason we bring it up in that way is because when you're trying to describe the Tyranid, there is no way to tell you what they look like. There's kind of a general vibe and a theme, but all of them are different, and they don't exist in that state for very long. So in a nutshell, the Tyranid are a massive collective hive mind in charge of a massive amount of mutagenic biomass. And
they're very hungry.
Yeah, they're called the Great Devourer. Me and Bones have actually talked about this before, where they are not necessarily the good guys of 40K, but they're the ones that are like the least malevolent, because their entire purpose is to just eat, and you happen to be food. They're a very simple creature to understand as far as drive goes. Their purpose is a cloud of locusts. They fly, they accumulate biomass, and they move on. This is the same trope that you've seen done in 50 different sci-fi movies, that you've read about in every sci-fi novel featuring an alien predatory species. They are just space locusts, eat everything bugs. But the way they work, I think, is kind of cool. So the hive mind, the actual intelligence behind the Tyranid, is something that we know very, very little about. I would actually hazard to say that we know more about the 4 chaos gods than we do anything about the Tyranid. And those are supposed to be eldritch beings beyond our comprehension or ability to understand. And so we are dealing with what I'm going to classify as an eldritch entity in the form of the Tyranid hive mind, because it is an ineffable intelligence that is the size of a galaxy.
Yeah, there's not very many of them now. Is the
yeah. No, numbers aren't really a problem. Well, and that's where it gets weird with the Tyranid again, because technically their numbers are not infinite, but they are not quantifiable, because you have giant pods that float around space that turn biomass goo, primordial goo from their insides, into organisms. Those organisms do the job, and then they are reabsorbed and turned back into protean primal ooze. And so it's so bizarre, with like, at any given time there could be anywhere between 16 and 16 trillion Tyranid active at any point.
I think that high end number is a little bit low.
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah,
We could
it's
probably
said
add
that
a few more zeros somewhere in there.
Yeah, there's supposed to be more Tyranid than there are stars in the galaxy. So
somebody did some math over how many just different species they probably would have consumed, say if they had consumed another galaxy before coming to ours, and assuming similar to our galaxy, it's like 2.6 quadrillion different species.
Oh man!
So,
and we also have to mention the fact that Tyranids absorb the genetic trait and material of the things that they consume, and then apply it to their
as needed.
Next series of mutations as needed.
Which is weird, because it's not that they actually take your genetic traits. Sometimes they take your genetic traits and just recreate them. Other times they just take your genetic traits and are like, we were not prepared for that, and just evolve a new defense for in case they run across acid-spitting space marines again.
They take everything and store it into their genetic memory.
Yeah.
And then they can use it. And then they can just use it ad nauseum or at will, and develop ways around it, as they did with the Tau.
Well, and here's the most interesting part about the Tyranid. So for all of our listeners that were unfamiliar, I hope we've painted a decent picture of what a bizarre entity we're dealing with is, right? Now, here's the most interesting part to me. The Tyranid are one of the most vicious, the most driven, and the most populate things in the galaxy. And when they attack, when they move, they're everywhere, right? They're in Space Marine 2, the video game. There's dozens of novels written about them. Every novel where you've seen a victory of any kind against the Tyranid was so small scale that it was insignificant.
Did he go quiet on everybody else?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Oh no. Technical difficulties.
Yeah, a little bit of tech difficulties. Am I back yet?
Hiccup's over. There he is.
All right.
Yes, so all right. Maybe.
Every time you've heard about a victory against the Tyranid, it's been so small scale that it's not relevant, right? The only time, like, you've heard us talk about the Imperium of Man and Chaos and all these factions and how badass they are. Compared to the Tyranid, I think the Imperium of Man has successfully repelled a Tyranid invasion of a biomass-populated planet, 3 times, without just blowing up the planet so the bugs don't want it anymore? And that's
most of their victories. It's just like, we just destroyed that place, so now we don't have any bugs.
Yeah, so bugs left. It's definitely I've got a roach infestation in my house, so I burned it down and moved.
The house down. Yeah.
The only one I could find is when they were repelled on the ball.
They were
Ball
repelled
is up there.
by Chaos. Chaos is literally what stalled them at Ball.
Yep.
Well, then, and your favorite guy showed up and finished them off. Robuto.
Are you talking about Robo Girly Man?
Yeah. Papa Smurf showed up and took care of business.
My big question with how many Blood Angels they ate, do you think they're going to get the Red Thirst? Like, do you think it's going to be...
Only if they want it. Like, they have it saved, just in case.
They're just going to run around on planets now screaming, "Where's Horus?"
Yeah. But yes, we have the devastation of Ball. Probably the most famous battle against the Tyranids that we see the most literature for is going to be against Hive Fleet Behemoth at the Battle of Macragge. So Macragge, you hear that actually shouted out a lot by the Ultramarines and Space Marine 2, where they'll cry out for Macragge, or Macragge is remembered, or whatever. Technically speaking, Hive Fleet Behemoth was defeated at Macragge. They were pushed back. They were held off, whatever, depending on the source. The Ultramarines' homeworld of Macragge was saved against the Tyranid during the First Tyrannic War. Now, what that entailed is a little less consistent. A lot of Macragge's victories came in orbit, and so they started engaging not the Tyranid themselves, the bizarre little organisms that are created by the goo, but instead tried to go after these far-reaching kind of pods in orbit and in and around the Macragge system using Star Nova class orbital weapons platforms. That's really kind of what did it. And even then, they only survived because the Tyranid got annoyed and just went to a different planet.
They also then immediately got bogged down with an entire Orc empire.
Yeah.
Which is what has occupied most of Behemoth in recent 40K history, that they're just now starting to branch back out from because they eventually ate all of the Orcs. Which I'm excited for Orcs to start springing out of Hive Fleet ships now. Just
right,
little spores of Orcs popping up.
It's like the cordyceps, like on the ants and spiders and stuff, where it's just Orcs pulling themselves out of a Tyranid
so does that
body.
mean the Tyranids now can change reality?
Probably not. No.
Well, and that's interesting because part of that
face.
is in the Orc genetic material, but here's the problem with that. The reason the Gestalt mind works with the Orcs is because enough minds think alike. With the Tyranid, that's not how they work. There's basically a brain.
Yeah, there's a mind. And
so
it's
all
shared.
Yeah,
well, it's
all
not
of them
shared,
are just...
but it is controlling the fleet.
They're all neurons in that brain.
So it'd be really easy to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
Not really, because they're not all believing it. One is believing it.
Yeah, there's one guy.
Because the hive is an entity.
One incomprehensibly intelligent guy.
Yeah.
Who can think across space and time.
And it's one of those situations in 40K where we get to see, the laws of physics get played with. It's because that has to be kind of a quantum mind, right? Like, it's got to be, otherwise it's thinking faster than the speed of light kind of thing, right?
By a significant margin.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the Tyranid. The Tyranid wars, the Tyrannic wars that you read about are basically apocalypse stories that we have no chance of winning. They've only been successfully held off a handful of times in the entire history of 40K, and they are a giant, unbelievable problem. Travis.
The problem has been delayed because of the Great Rift has actually slowed progress of the Tyranid fleets.
This is true.
Because not everything can go well for any one group.
It doesn't matter
in the 40K universe.
That time does not matter to the hive mind.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't matter how long it takes. It doesn't matter how long it takes to them. While the Necrons were slumbering for 60 million years, the Nids were out there devouring things, becoming more and more powerful. The time's irrelevant.
So that brings us to an interesting point of how the Tyranid tie into the galaxy at large, right? Oh, Eric.
So one thing at some point we do need to talk about, I think, is like our thoughts on like why they came. Like in the sense of like from what I was reading, they came from somewhere else, but like I couldn't find exactly where. I know Travis brought up the Emperor, but like what people like what do you really think kind of got them here?
So there are two pervading theories in the circles, and both of them seem plausible to me. The first one is that they are very much a plague of locusts, and that wherever they're coming from is now little more than biomassless driven rock that they have no use for anymore. Which, that makes sense. I think that's probably the Occam's razor, is that they're a predatory species that leaves nothing behind.
Occam's razor, the simplest solution is usually correct.
And so they probably just ate everything from their galaxy and went and found something new. The more terrifying theory that kind of aligns with the dark forest hypothesis for our real life, for those science nerds that listen in, is that they are fleeing from a more voracious or capable predator.
See, that's the one I like.
That one's more terrifying
That's
to
super
me.
problematic for everybody in the Milky Way.
And so, yeah, those are kind of the two theories. Here's what I base my thoughts on, and that's the fact that of all of the species and factions and sentience and whatnot that we have in 40K, the one that should have the least amount of conflict with the Tyranid should be the Necrons. Necrons are not biomaterial.
Sort of.
Mostly. They don't have any conflict with the bio needs of the Tyranid. In fact, if the Tyranid ate all the people, the Necrons should be stoked. However, the reason that we have the Void Dragon being reawoken on Mars, the reason that we have, the Silent King returning and waking up all the Necron dynasties, is because Homeboy was out in the intergalactic space on his chair, saw the Tyranid coming, and said, "That's going to be a huge problem. I got to go home." For somebody that should have no fear, much less any concern about a giant alien bug, for having the most advanced technologies and the highest understanding of all of the systems of 40K, to come running back home and waking up people that he hates and that hate him to try to stop them, that's bizarre to me. And it's because of that that I don't believe in the Dark Forest hypothesis in regards that the Tyranid are coming from a different galaxy. I think that they are a predatory wave that have flown into ours, and we are just unlucky.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of like just another bad guy out there for the sake of the story, you know. But
Yeah.
I think like, well, I don't think that they're just a predatory species either. I mean, I think that again, the hive mind has to be so great that it has like logic. It has to be thinking, making plans, right? Like it's not just out there like just consuming things for no apparent reason. I think that there's got to be something behind it. I also think that when they made the Tyranids, they were like, "Oh, these are cool little space bugs," and then they were like, "They can overcome anything," and they're like, "Oh shit!" Like later on, they're like, "Oh shit, power scaling, fuck."
Yeah,
you know,
this is going to be a problem later on. It also could be, I mean, in the same way that the Skaven were used to get that hard reset on the Warhammer Fantasy universe, Tyranids are set up in a prime example to give us the hard reset in the galaxy.
They're the sponge in the sink if they want to start over.
Yeah.
I don't think it started as that, though. I think that's just like what it's turned into.
I don't think the Skaven really started that way either, if I'm being honest.
Probably not.
It just kind of developed into that, because it was like, well, they're an unknowable number. They breed like normal rats, and they have forced all the subterranean species out, so no one's paying attention to them as they breed like crazy.
Inject some cool chaos fuckery, and you get a universe-ending threat.
Okay, so real quick, we have to give credit to the people that made Warhammer, just because of the avenues they can go with the story, though. Like, compared to anything else, like, one of the huge fucking upsides, like, just from doing this week, like, where you got, like, the way the Primarchs can come back randomly, the way the fucking... There's so many open-ended things with the Eldari, and then with the Tyranids and stuff like that. Like, there's so many avenues. Like, it's kind of cool to see that they're not telling us a lot of info, even though I want it. Because they could play it either way with the Tyranids. They could say they're running away from a bigger force. They could even say that, like, maybe somebody made them and released them by accident. Like, we'll never fucking know until it kind of slows down and they need a new fucking grab, and then they'll put something out.
Yeah, the orcs made them. We talked about that already.
It's the orcs' fault. All of this goes back to the old ones, man.
What's up, Travis?
Travis, what you got?
So do you guys subscribe to the theory that each hive fleet is operating independently as a single species competitive with one another?
No,
In
absolutely
the
not.
same way that like
Nah.
groups of predators will force out other
Okay.
groups
Actually,
of
so
predators.
this is actually what I wanted to bring up when I was talking. So if you've not read Devastation of Ball, small spoilers for the B plot here.
You've been spoiler flagged. Leave now. Return in 7 minutes.
So the B plot of that book puts you into the perspective that you follow along with what you would think of as a lictor, but what the lictor thinks of as the lictor. They are. It is the only lictor. There's only the lictor. They are all the same. They all have all the same memories. They have all the collective wisdom of all of the lictors that come before. It remembers every death it's ever had. Like, they only exist as one thing. So that, to me, is like, I mean, almost blatant proof that there's no individualism among their hive fleets.
Yeah, I think that it's really interesting when you
But
start
the
looking
Inquisition has theorized that.
Yeah, let's talk about
'cause
the
they're always
Inquisition's
right.
theories for a minute. So there is a
When have they
separation.
been wrong? Because if they've ever been wrong, they killed all the people that knew it.
Yeah. There is a distinct separation that we can already draw from when it comes to the Tyranid, and that's with the Gene Stealers. I brought that up earlier. Now, the Gene Stealers are a whole different bag of dice that evolve in a whole different way. Now, I'm going to preface by saying the idea that each major hive fleet, like, because realistically there's only the three major hive fleets, right? We have Kraken, we have
That we have
Leviathan, that
experience.
we've encountered.
Yeah.
So there's
Kraken,
also some
Leviathan,
speculation that the Tyranids that have been encountered so far in the Milky Way are literally the scout fleets.
Yeah. Which, again, that's a terrifying prospect. But I digress. The idea that each hive fleet is effectively one fish in the galactic pond is kind of cool in my mind. It gives it a very, like, almost a Goa'uld from Stargate kind of vibe going on, where you could have one hive fleet in contest with another hive fleet. And I love the concept of having a physical battle, all while you have a Dr. Xavier in X-Men mental battle between the competing hive minds. Narratively, I love that. I don't think that's the case if I'm really going to put money down on the table, but I love it narratively. I think that's a cool idea. But
I like the single hive mind idea myself, because it just makes them much more frightening as an enemy.
well, and it definitely makes them much more difficult to like wrap your head around, right? They're harder to understand if you treat them on that scale, because you're talking about more individual minds with the same complexity as a human mind, all feeding into a massive neural network that is trillions of trillions times more powerful than anything we can comprehend.
That will literally cripple anybody attempting.
Yeah. So, I know we're running a little bit long, but before we dive too hard on it, I want to talk about the Gene Stealers and the Gene Stealer cults. These are this is the second faction in 40K, right? And the way that they work is probably one of my favorite narratives in 40K as a whole. So the whole purpose of the Gene Stealers is they will move ahead of a Tyranid fleet. And for a long time, the Imperium Man thought that the Gene Stealers acted as a kind of scout recon infiltration force. Because that is what they do. They will find an established society of a significant amount of biomass. They will move in and they will start seeding amongst that population. The reason they're called gene stealers is because that's what they do. They steal your gene sequence and they begin to propagate. Now, this breaks down into several different generations of propagation, but as the gene stealers move in, the way that it works is their minds start getting connected to one another's in a very similar hive mind to what we see from the Tyranids. And they will start to unite, generally form a secondary cult, that's why they're called gene stealer cults, that stands against the oppression of the Imperium of Man, and they will rise up in all glory to the four-armed Emperor and the Star Lord. And
I actually read a little bit about that too. Apparently, like part of their thing is like taking the people and injecting them with a parasite, essentially.
an
That
ovipositor.
yeah,
A
that
couple
also
of technical difficulties over here.
that makes them see the Tyranids as like saviors. Like it makes them think
Yeah.
that they're gods essentially, instead of giant scary bug things.
So yeah, and so you start getting these hybrid individuals that are being born with extra arms or chitinous armor plates or truly twisted and malformed versions of themselves that sometimes will get all the way up to the upper echelons of a planet's government. It will destabilize the planet, make it nearly impossible for it to call for help or defend itself. And when the Tyranids roll in, they eat the planet all the easier. They just acquire all the biomass.
Also, there's the beginning of the it's like that's like phase 1 of the invasion. Phase 2, like the beginning of that, is them fucking with gravity. They have like little like scout ships essentially that just roll in and completely just go crazy with the gravity of the ship, causing like giant tsunamis, like they'll wipe out whole cities because they don't really care if there's anybody alive or not. They just want to eat all of the things.
Yeah, they just want the biomass. It doesn't matter if it's alive.
And like if you ever read about the Murder World story, like the way they eat people too is weird because they put them on trees and shit. Like
yeah, they're almost like shrikes because realistically, none of the organisms that you're encountering on a planet are eating. They don't eat. They don't have systems for that. They are accumulating biomass to be scooped up by the ships, by the massive capital organisms that come by. And so you end up very shrike-like behavior. For those of you who don't know the Reaper bird, they'll take biomass like bodies and they'll store it. They'll nest it up. Sometimes they cocoon it. They'll pin it to trees to be, accumulated later. They'll bury it in rocks. Like they have all kinds of instinctive behavior, but they don't actually eat anything until the big ship comes. And the big ship comes, and it doesn't really eat either. It just digests the planet.
it's pretty fucking gory.
They also feed the world with like their vegetation, which is these very very like hostile, deadly vegetation of its own. Right, they replace everything that's already there with things that they've engineered, bioengineered.
So one of my favorite, kind of narrative devices. You were talking about the one with the lictor earlier, Bones. One of my favorites came from, and I forget the name of the novel, but it's out there. And it was a story about a planetary defense force defending a planet during a Gene Stealer cult uprising and what it's like afterwards when the actual Tyranid arrive. And the Tyranid changed, like you mentioned the gravity earlier, they changed the entire ecology of the planet on a scale that is bizarre. One of the scenes talked about how the air became viscous. The atmosphere became viscous as it was converted into biomass to be absorbed. And so, like, our jets and helicopters and spaceships were getting bogged down in the swamp of our atmosphere. And I think that that is such a wild thought where you can see the sky melt.
Oh, we also have to mention when they do come, there's like this saying like you see two shadows and you know it's the end or something like that, right? Because they have what they call the shadow in the warp or something like that, right? Because is it the Norn queens that do it? I can't remember what causes it, but essentially
crowns, something like that.
Norn queen is I'm pretty sure what the individuals in charge of the Hive fleet, leading the Hive fleet, are called. But essentially, their psychic impression is so strong that, like, first of all, just being near them can kill psychers, and it makes everybody that even if you're not like a psyker or psychically like attuned, you have this like feeling of uneasiness. Like somebody described it as like when you're in the basement in the dark and you're like trying to walk back up your stairs, and you're like, I don't know where I am. Like,
Something's
I don't know
behind
what's
me.
going on. There's something in here. Like, just that really like strong presence of unease.
Yeah. The shadow on the warp is wild. Well, and so I'm gonna yo-yo just a little bit back to the Gene Stealer cults, because another interesting tidbit. So we talked about how they move forward, they infect the planet, they make it destabilized. It was later discovered that they don't do this deliberately. Like, the destabilization of the planet, that's not a conscious decision by the Gene Stealers. The Gene Stealers are a Tyranid organism that instinctively fear other Tyranid, and they flee in front of the Tyranid fleet, seeking shelter and food. They are so afraid of their parent race that they will find a place that they can like nest up and be like, all right, cool, this one is safe. We're fine now. We're safe now. And the Tyranid just follow their pheromone trail to where they know there will be food, because that's where the Gene Stealers went. And then they eat it, and the Gene Stealers run away again, like, no, they found us again. And that dichotomy is glorious to me. Like, I absolutely love that.
I also love the fact that the Gene Stealers, as they infiltrate a society and gain positions like higher and higher up the tier, as they, I guess, infect. I don't know another way to really describe it.
Generationally infect. It's strange. Yeah.
More groups, they then start making decisions that make it easier for Tyranids to invade the system.
Yep. Getting ready for the Star Gods.
Yeah,
Four-armed Emperor.
They intentionally destabilize whatever system they're intentionally disable the star system they're going
but
to.
Not for the reason they think they are.
Yeah, it's not consciously on purpose, I guess.
Not for the reason that they think they are, but the reason that they were engineered for.
Yeah,
because let's not like they are Tyranids still, even if they don't really think that they are Tyranids still.
Yeah, no, they were designed that way by the hive mind. Like, that they do it on purpose.
Okay, so here's the big question for everybody. Since they only have one mind and Chaos can't control them, what if Chaos got their hands on the one mind?
So I don't think that that's a possibility for two reasons. First, nothing in Chaos has power equivalent to the hive mind. It just simply does not. I think the hive mind, and maybe this is heresy, come at me in the comments if you think I'm wrong, but as fundamental to reality as the Chaos gods are, as fundamentally tied to behavior and soul and psychic activity as the Chaos gods are, the hive mind intrinsically destabilizes warp signature around it for hundreds of light years, if not more.
Yeah, we don't even know about the actual hive mind. We know about like the like what the Norn queens do, right? But we don't know about the hive mind. It could be the entire galaxy is. Also, there are there are Tyranids that are psychers, that are their whole evolution is being psychics. So if they can do that, what is the hive mind?
I think they have a particular resistance against the warp 2 having a singular conscience.
Oh, they have. Yeah, they are immune to like corruption.
Yeah,
they're immune to all.
How are you, as an individual Chaos God, going to corrupt something that's so vast without it literally overtaking you as well? There's no chink in that armor. Like, there's no good strategy to go about trying to devour the hive mind, because, like, you can't. That's why trying to eat a whole pizza in one bite. Like, it's just not happening.
Oh no, we could figure this out.
So I also think that part of it comes in the fact that a lot of the narrative comes from fitting it into the game. I personally do not believe that the Tyranid have psychers. I don't think that they attach to the warp or psychic activities we understand it at all. I think that they've evolved ways to twist reality and warp reality with their own bug space magic. But I do not think they're psychers. I think they were called psychers because they needed to fit into the tabletop game.
Everyone needs to know it's 2-2. USA, Canada. 2-2. Go Sam Bennett.
Yeah,
I don't disagree with that, but I mean, just as a term, like, it's easy to say like they're Tyranid psychers, but yeah, I mean, they obviously affect the warp in a way when they're there, right? Like disrupting it. So whether or not they're actually like psychers per se, or if they've just found some other way to. Essentially, I think, like, it's not an individual Tyranid doing it. It's essentially just the hive mind working through that Tyranid. I see no reason why the the hive mind itself might not just be. I mean, it could almost be a warp entity itself, like the Emperor, right? Like how he
Yeah.
exists in a still physical form, but also as basically a warp entity.
Well, and you start getting a little, to throw it towards Bones' comic book stuff, it's got a real Null vibe, right? Like
But
God of
wouldn't
the
that also
Symbiotes kind of thing.
play into them being like made more aware of the presence of biological material in the Milky Way via the Emperor's light?
It absolutely could, but here's the intrinsic problem. Now, the warp has been explored in the narrative in a lot of different ways, in really inconsistent ways, because one author's alpha class psyker is not equivalent to the next one. That's why you get the term from players and fans in 40k
Power
of
creep.
just psychic fuckery, is because there's no real limit to what a psyker is capable of, and it does not translate to the tabletop, right? What we do know is that a good portion of consistency in the canon is that in order to be a psyker, you have to be able to touch and interact with warp. You need a soul to do that. Tyranids don't have that. They don't have a soul or any quantifiable soul energy.
Again, but maybe the hive mind does. I don't know, right? Like maybe
As
the
far
hive
as
mind is
we
the
Maybe
soul.
they have a soul.
Yeah.
Singular. There's just one.
But no matter how you slice that pizza, there is no way the Chaos Gods can stand against that. There's no way that they can exist without it. I actually think the Chaos Gods might be the ones that want the Tyranids stopped the most, because if the Tyranid come in and eat everybody, there's not souls in the warp anymore, and if there's not souls in the warp anymore, the Chaos Gods can't eat anything anymore, and they die.
Not only that, like they kind of exist because not just eating souls, but because like war exists, right?
Yeah,
or because yeah, I mean, I guess Zinch could still live because change, but eventually I think they stop changing too, right? The Tyranids eat everything; they stop changing, right? They have no need to evolve anymore. So they would just eliminate everything.
Yeah,
and
they literally represent the anathema of everything that harms. Like, they literally encompass everything that harms the Chaos Gods. Because, again, if there's only one species, there's no war. You know, one species, one mind, there's going to be no war. Down goes corn.
They're immune
one
to
species,
basically
one mind. They're not going to be seeking perfection or, lust or any of those other things. Because, again, they're a single entity, or at least of a single mind. And then, they're literally the counter to everything chaos.
Yeah. Well, and additionally, when you start looking at Nurgle, nearly all of the Tyranid are functionally immortal. Because even the ones that take on a bio shape, like the Gene Stealers, there have been tales of Gene Stealer nests on Space Hulks that have been isolated from all contact for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And they're still doing good. And so the concept of death doesn't
or
apply
even
here.
disease and decay, because then you just liquefy them back into base biomass. And
well, disease doesn't matter for them anyway, because like every time there's a new disease, they're just instantly going to be immune to it. Like, they just evolve immunity.
I mean, even in Space Marine 2, they mentioned that they set off a virus bomb, and all it did was stall them.
Yeah, it'll kill the first wave, and then they were like,
they had to evolve an immunity.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're talking about, with the Tyranid guys, because I know we're coming up on the episode here, you're talking about a cosmic megafauna superorganism that is so difficult to quantify to a human mind that it's the weirdest shit you can come up with, shoved into a bag covered in claws and scales. That's all a Tyranid is.
And sometimes like sliminess.
Yeah.
Or beetle-like carapace. Because like I said, they're amalgamation of reptilian features and insectal features.
I mean, they're amalgamation of 2.6 quadrillion different species.
Yeah. All the useful parts anyway.
One of my favorite factions that I play in the game, of course, is Kroot. They're a very minor faction. You kind of gotta be in the know to understand who the Kroot are. But the quick and dirty of them is that they are similar in bare bones drive. Kroot are highly morphic, and so what they do is when they eat something, they can take genetic material from whatever they eat and apply it to their current form. And so if they want to get big and strong, they eat big and strong things. They grow more muscle mass, more dense skeleture, that kind of thing. They can do it to grow wings, get scales, breathe underwater, whatever. They're a highly morphic species, part of the Tau Empire.
That's what I was about to mention. Is that they're technically Tau
And
for the
so
greater good.
they refuse. When you read the novels about them, the Tyranid are considered forbidden food. They won't do it because every shaper and every crew that has attempted to eat Tyranid in order to gain any kind of bonus immediately goes crazy, gets connected to the hive mind, goes batshit, and liquefies. And I think that that's super cool because it shows that the Tyranid organism is on a scale beyond anything in the Milky Way. Travis.
Maybe they just didn't cook it right.
Yeah, they just didn't cook it right. But yeah, it's one of only a handful of foods. Like they're quite capable of eating even a Necron. Like they can bite off and digest necrodermis, right? But they won't because everybody who's ever tried, they eat a finger from a Necron, for example, and it just turns into a bunch of Necron scarabs that self-replicate and then eat the body and return back to the Necron. There are a handful of foods they just can't eat. They can't eat demons because demons aren't stuff. They're not physical.
technically
Same
real.
reason Tyranids can't eat them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
demons
not
aren't
food.
Yeah, they're not food. And so the Tyranid superorganism it's such a bizarre one to try to do an episode over because I really don't feel like we're covering it super well.
I mean, we didn't even talk about like
Um,
different kinds of units and their weaponry. Like,
Yeah.
there's so much more like interesting
Well, there's
stuff.
so many like little bits and bops that go into
So
it.
let's go ahead and cover this. Let's look at some of their crunchy stuff, right? So look at stuff they actually do in the table.
I do gotta say they have some of the absolute best sculpts. Like they're like big stuff.
No contest.
So good.
So yeah, their sculpts are absolutely amazing. The newest line that just came out with the Norn, whatever they're called, Norn Tyrannifexes. I don't know. They got Tyranid names, guys. Like it's too many syllables and way too many vowels.
Carnifex, Lictor, Reaper, Hormagaunt,
Termagaunt. But yeah, there's a Norn. What are the floating psychic guys from the video game? They always come in packs of 3s.
Neuranthrope.
Yeah. So the Norn Crown Neurothrope is probably one of my favorite sculpts I've ever seen. They actually had a Hive Tyrant that is now a Neurothrope Hive Tyrant that is just an amazing model. I want one so bad just to paint it. In fact, our good buddy that plays Joey, he got into 40K not because he knew anything about the game or because of anything. Because he's an artist. He saw a Tyranid Hive Tyrant model and wanted to paint that, and that's how he got into the game.
They just look so cool.
Of the like models to pick up and paint, Tyranids, I would probably put them towards the top of the difficulty scale.
Oh, absolutely.
Just for the sheer amount of blending you have to do, because very few of them have like a real, just like definitive hard line outside of their carapace, right? Like a lot of them have the carapace armor, which is easily going to be like one color with your highlight. But the skin on some of them, like the Neurolictor.
There's a
organic.
Chick on TikTok that just paints a fuck ton of Tyranids in different like characters. So she's done like a Bowser, a Spyro.
The Yoshi one.
Yeah.
The Yoshi one was so good.
She's so good. I wish I could remember her name right now. It's like she definitely deserves a shout out.
Yeah, I wish we could quote her.
Dude, she deserves a cover on White Dwarf. Her painting skills are amazing.
The Venusaur was my absolute favorite. Oh, so good.
I'm a big fan
Norn
of Bowser.
Emissary.
I thought Bowser was cool.
Norn
Emissary. I was just looking at that.
Yeah. My favorite Tyranid model of all time is the Norn Emissary. And that's going up against things like the Parasite of Mortrex and the Neurolictor, which I think are unbelievably cool too. And that's not even looking at Death Leaper. Like, there's so many good sculpts.
The Harridan is probably my favorite.
Oh, big space bug dragons.
Yeah, I mean, if the game, like crunchy number wise, was true to the lore, then Tyranids would just be the only army that anybody ever played.
Yeah, they would be literally unplayable. Like you would just win, and if two of them met on the table, they would just kill all the other players.
For anyone curious about the meta, Tyranids fall somewhere usually towards the bottom, once the full update comes out for the set. Now, if they get released early in the like new edition, if they get released early, they're going to be real high. Their fall off's real fast.
Yeah, generally Tyranid will ride the wave of their release pretty good. You get a little bell curve of it, and then they drop back down. So they're very yo-yo. If you meet somebody that is a Tyranid player and that has been a Tyranid player main for a long time, you know they're a real fan because they will ride out the highs and the lows. Yeah, running Tyranid on the table. They not only are they a complex paint scheme, they're one of the most complex armies to play, in my opinion. You have such an incredible variety of models, extraordinarily unusual tactics and special abilities. In previous editions, your psychic phase was insane with what you could do, and they have to deal with what's called synapse in the game, where you have to have control units controlling all of your little gribblies that don't have any like brain of their own, and so you suffer a weakness where if they take out your synaptic control units, generally your army would fall apart. In the newer editions, they've done away with that. Now your synapse is more of just a sweet buff that you get it if you manage to hold it, but you don't need it. They've also done away with kind of the standard swarm construction. Now you can just field giant monsters if you want to, or you can field an infinite number, literally infinite number of little gribblies. And that's not even including their Shadows in the Warp major abilities. They're one of the most complex armies, I think, in the game.
When going back, this is probably going to be several editions. When Deny the Witch was still a portion of your phase, to counter the psychic phase, Tyranids were absolutely devastating. They were on the table itself. They were usually a direct counter to both the Eldar and the Grey Knights, which are both very, very psychic heavy armies, and the Tyranids would just stomp both of those groups because they rely so heavily on that psychic phase. But Deny the Witch isn't a thing anymore. So
yeah, well, and even with their more modern mechanics, I think they're super thematic. With the way that some of the Shadow and the Warp stuff goes, where it slowly takes over the table, it gives you that inevitable "they're coming, there's no stopping them" vibe. I think it's super cool. And they do generally fall in the lower brackets as far as the meta goes. They are not considered a highly competitive army the majority of the time. I still think they're very, very good.
Points-wise, they're very expensive. Like, just to get into the super crunch of it, you can field an entire army of big giant monsters, but you're not going to field very many. And then even when you go down to, like, the general swarm, when you look at, like, say, a Gribbly unit of Astra Militarum versus like Gaunts, your point value is much higher on the Astra Militarum, so you're getting more bang for your buck on that end than you are with the Tyranids. They're a very point-heavy army. But again, there are situations where they're very hyper-effective. And like I said, if you're a mainstay for Tyranids, you're going to have to ride that wave.
Yeah. That's just, and I respect them for it. I hope that the Tyranid mains out there, especially the ones that listen to our show, know that I recognize you and I respect your ability to stick to your bugs, whether they're clearing tables or not. And I think that's super cool. Welcome to the hive mind.
Yeah, send us pictures of your Hierophant Biotitan.
Obviously. I want to see pictures of everybody's paint schemes, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We've been talking about the hive fleets and the Tyranid hive fleets. You get the 3 big main Tyranid hive fleets. In the lore, a lot of that cracks off and turns into other hive fleets or splinter fleets or tendrils or however you want to do it, and you get such a wild variation in color and biomorph and stuff. I love looking at Tyranid armies because the kit bashing and the customization of the models, the color schemes are amazing and I love them. And so yeah, send us pictures of your Tyranids, guys. Well, that would be super cool.
Yeah, there's one like Splinter faction that's like purple and pink, and they look fucking so cool. I can't remember what they were called, but they they have like my favorite color scheme.
Yeah, I know Joey was doing his in this cracked lava style vibe. It's so cool looking, man.
Yeah,
but yeah, you're talking about dozens and dozens.
Hydra, that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah. Dozens and dozens of splinter freaks. Most of them are named after mythological creatures like Scylla or Ophidia or Ouroboros. And you can do anything with your Tyranid and be lore friendly. Doesn't even matter. Come up with your own deal. I'm making Hive Fleet. I don't know, give me a mythological creature. Minotaur. And oh, it's so cool. Travis, what you got?
They're all being piloted by the Alpha Legion.
Yeah, that's what
This
it
is
is.
all
It's all the
Tyranid.
Alpha Legion.
Yeah, the Tyranid are all part of a big Alpha Legion plot, which
I
was
want to do an
actually
episode on the
originally
Alpha Legion so bad.
masterminded by the Orcs, who were created by the Old Ones, who were also imagined into existence by the Orcs. Pikachu.
Pikachu.
It's all about Vulcan right now, man.
But yeah, the Tyranids, we wanted to do an episode on the Tyranids so that you understood what they are, what they do, and how they function, guys. And trying to shove that into a 1 hour episode is an absolute nightmare. You're dealing with an entity that doesn't have a shape or a name, that doesn't have a leader or a soul that we understand. If you're playing bugs, it's because you have one drive, and that is to table your opponent by eating everything. It's what
They're
they
just
do.
hungry. That's their whole.
So I do think this makes us have covered basically all of them except for Tau, like all
We
the
do need to
major
cover the Tau.
factions.
Space cows.
Man, we're gonna fight. We're gonna fight so hard.
They're space cows.
Yeah, we need. As far as the major factions go, we did the Imperium of Man. That kind of covers the Mechanikists, Space Marines, and the Astra Militarum.
I mean, there's obviously like a bunch of other sub factions and stuff that
Yeah.
like I said, we can just continue to talk about. But as far as like just overviews of the major groups,
I think the Tau might have to come up next.
Yeah,
I'd be excited for
and
that.
the Leagues of Votan.
We did the leagues.
Did we do? Yeah, we did do a Leagues
Yeah.
episode. That's right. Yeah,
We did the leagues.
I had to talk about space squads. They're my third best favorite.
All right. But on that, Eric, do we have a question of the week to cover before we round this episode out?
I didn't find a really good one, so I'm going to go with, if you were in said world, what chapter would you be?
Dead.
Oh, I have to be a Space Marine?
Yeah.
Dead.
Okay,
I would be dead.
so- I have to be a Space
I
Marine.
mean, you'd probably be
Um,
dead, but
Statistically speaking.
Yeah, I'm older than 15 hours, so
Yeah, like, statistically speaking, none of us are making it.
one of
you know
those
what?
4 should make it.
I always
Attrition
love a
rate
lot of the human factions. There's a bunch of them that I don't like. I've actually kind of fallen out of love with the Space Marines, and because of that, even though they have the most lore, I'm gonna make the controversial decision. Be like, I'm gonna go 20th Legion and be an Alpha Legionnaire. Not that any of you would know that, and so my answer is gonna be
I was about to
Salamander.
say allegedly Alpha Legion.
Allegedly Alpha Legion.
if I got to be in this world, I'm giving myself the best chance I possibly can, and I'm going Custodes.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. I mean,
You and
if I
your
have to-
700 brothers and sisters in the entire
yeah,
galaxy.
we fucking kill half of the fucking world before we die, though.
Hey, you get to hang out with Henry Cavill, so
It's a big plus. It's a big plus. I mean, I have to stay tried and true with my Legion. I picked them very early on, and I would have to go Space Wolves. Like I said, I would be dead very early. Their attrition rate is astronomically high. I think they're only beat out by a handful of legions, like the Blood Angels and like the Lamenters.
oh man, poor Lamenters.
The poor Lamenters. Yeah, they're also sad about being Lamenters.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know, Lamenters are cursed with bad luck.
Yeah.
They're
like,
I think they're called the Doomed Legion is one of their nicknames. Like they just perpetually manifest bad luck.
Who's their Primarch?
No one knows.
Yeah, they're from the 13th founding, the unknown founding, whatever.
Yeah, they're an unknown founding.
Oh.
I want to say it's theorized that they're Dorns, but
I think it was also theorized that they were Dark Angels as well.
Yeah, there's supposedly
a back and forth from, because I think they there's one rumor that they sided with.
According to the wiki, they're successors of the Blood Angels officially right now. So allegedly, because the Inquisition never gets anything wrong.
Yeah, it's all canon and it's not canon. So. But yeah, they just perpetually have bad luck. But so yeah, I'd have to go Space Wolves. Like, give me my Viking homies.
Yeah, you've been a Space Wolf for
Since
many moons.
That was the first army I picked way back in I think I started in 4th edition when they were the very bottom of the meta, and then they stayed that way all the way to 8th.
I can tell you exactly what edition we were playing in. Hold on.
That'd be Salamander.
They were so bad.
Shocked.
Space Wolves were so expensive. Your point cost per model were astronomically high. I was down there when it was the bottom 3 were always Space Wolves, Tyranids, and Necrons. It was just disastrous.
I like the Salamanders. They're pretty decent.
So yeah, Travis, 4th edition.
Yeah,
because
4th.
I got into Mordheim in 2002. We got into 40K. That would have been around 2004 when you were graduating. So yeah, 4th edition. We're fogies, man.
What are we on now? 11th, 10th, 10th.
Yeah, I think they hinted at 11th coming not too long from now.
Yeah, I think towards the end of
Which,
quarter
honestly,
4, 2025. I think
only 6 editions in 20 years. It's not bad.
That's not terrible. The interest rate's not terrible on that one. I
How
mean,
long
honestly,
has
you don't
10th
have to
been out?
replace your army. You just have to update your
Yeah,
codex.
I've used the exact same Necron models since 2004.
You're fine. It's a little harder on Space Marine players now because they had to update to Primaris.
Yeah. That happened actually right after I tried to put Blood Ravens army together, and then the Primaris got released, and I was like, fuck.
That doesn't matter. Blood Ravens stole all their equipment anyway.
Yeah, I'm just gluing spikes on them and calling them Alpha Legion.
That's fair. All you have to do is paint them a little,
paint them blue,
scaly.
Yeah. Anyway, Travis, drumroll us out of here, guys. Before we leave, if you watch to this, point, obviously you like what you're you like what you're hearing, you like what we're doing. We did our best to cover the Tyranids. We'll likely jump back to the Tyranid again.
There's us glossing over the Eldar too. It's here's a
here's
small portion.
Sure, yeah. Guys, best way to support the channel is, of course, to give us all that sweet engagement stuff. Give us a like, give us a comment, give us a follow, tell your friends to do it too. Second best way to support the channel is to buy some merch. You'll find all of the links to our cool stuff on our link tree. We got some pretty sweet stuff. My personal favorite are our cups. So yeah, that's the best way to support the channel. Appreciate you being here.
And with that,
I'll do merch because we did new logos. So new logos are done. I'm gonna put new merch up. So it's all gonna change. We'll see what we put up. I don't know. Be interesting. And it's still 2-2. Just so everybody knows. Canada, US. Good game.
And with that, we're gonna bring this episode to a close. We are crossing the Nerdverse, and we'll catch you next time, where we will be talking about the Tau.
The Tau.
For the greater good.
See you guys.
Goodbye.